You've got 30 days to relocate your livestock situation, or we'll have you forcibly removed. I'm standing on the porch of my grandfather's ranch land that's been in my family since 1952, staring at this woman who moved here 6 months ago and thinks she can evict me from my own property. Karen Whitfield clutches her clipboard like it's the Constitution itself. Her bleached blonde hair shellacked into place despite the Texas wind. The morning air carries the honest smell of cattle and fresh-cut hay, but it's getting contaminated by her industrial-strength vanilla perfume that could probably kill mosquitoes at 50 yards. This isn't just about some HOA complaint. This is about a 40-acre ranch with oil rights that some developer wants. And Karen here thinks she's found herself a pushover. Ma'am, I say, keeping my voice level. You do realize this is my private property, right? Her laugh could curdle milk. Not for long, sweetie. What would you do if some newcomer tried to steal your family's legacy? Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I bet your HOA has nightmare stories, too. Little did Karen know, she just started a war with the guy who spent 15 years writing federal HOA regulations. Let me back up. My name is Garrett Stone, and 6 months ago, I was living the Washington, D.C. dream. Senior policy advisor at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, making 6 figures writing regulations that govern homeowner associations across America. 15 years of bureaucratic battles, congressional hearings, and enough coffee to power a small city. Then Grandpa Joe passed away and left me the Lazy G Ranch in Cedar Falls, Texas. Population 8,400, where everyone knows your business before you do. This place has been in our family since Grandpa bought it fresh out of Korea in 1952. 40 acres of prime Texas land with mineral rights that oil companies have been circling like vultures for decades. I traded my government cubicle for a wraparound porch where morning coffee tastes like freedom and the sunrise turns everything golden. Walking out to check fence lines at dawn, my boots crunch on the same gravel path Grandpa walked for 70 years. But apparently my slice of heaven was about to become someone else's problem. Enter Karen Whitfield, age 52, real estate agent turned neighborhood tyrant. 8 months ago, she moved from Dallas after buying an $850,000 McMansion in Whispering Oaks Estates, the new subdivision that sprouted up next to my ranch like a subdivision-sized migraine. Within a week of closing, she was running for the HOA board. Within a month, she was president. Within 2 months, she was wielding that clipboard like it could summon the wrath of God. Picture a woman whose artificially blonde hair could survive a nuclear blast, with an aggressive smile that screams, "I need to speak to your manager from 3 counties away." Always prowling around in athleisure outfits that cost more than most people's car payments. Her first violation notice appeared on my door 3 months after I moved in. My cattle were creating agricultural nuisances that threatened property values. Apparently, the smell of honest ranch work was more offensive than her personality. Never mind that my family was raising cattle here when her neighborhood was still empty prairie. At first, I laughed it off. Had to be a mistake, right? Some city transplant who didn't understand small-town Texas. I figured a friendly conversation over sweet tea would sort everything out. That was my first mistake. Karen showed up the next week with her cousin Dale from County Code Enforcement, both armed with cameras and bad attitudes. They photographed everything. My manure pile, Grandpa's beloved 1974 tractor, even my chickens, who looked personally offended by the attention. She kept mentioning she was researching her options for forcing compliance. And that's when the penny dropped. This wasn't confusion. This was war, and Karen Whitfield had just picked a fight with the wrong rancher. 2 days after her photography session, I found a thick manila envelope taped to my front door. Inside was the most official-looking cease and desist notice I'd ever seen outside of a federal courthouse. The letterhead claimed it was from Whitfield and Associates Legal Services, which I later discovered was Karen's kitchen table and a laser printer she bought at Costco. The document demanded immediate cessation of all agricultural operations on my property, citing health hazards, environmental concerns, and aesthetic violations. She'd even included a doctored survey map showing my ranch somehow encroaching on HOA territory. The notice required me to attend an emergency compliance hearing at the Whispering Oaks Country Club, not a request, a summons. Like I was some kind of criminal defendant instead of a property owner minding his own business on land I legally owned. I showed up anyway because sometimes you've got to see just how deep the crazy goes. The country club conference room reeked of industrial air freshener, trying to mask the smell of old money and older prejudices. Karen had arranged the seating like a kangaroo court, 12 HOA board members sitting behind a long mahogany table like inquisitors, with a single metal folding chair facing them. Karen presided wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. She'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled Agricultural Operations Impact on Community Standards, complete with dramatic photos of my property. My manure pile became a biological hazard zone. My chickens were suddenly disease vectors. "Mr. Stone," Karen announced, her voice bouncing off wood-paneled walls. "You've been called here tonight to address serious violations of our community covenants." I looked around at these people, mostly Dallas and Houston transplants who'd moved to small-town Texas for authentic rural charm, but wanted to bleach it clean first. "Ma'am," I said, settling into that uncomfortable chair, "I'd like to see a copy of these community covenants you keep referencing." The room's temperature dropped faster than a lead balloon. Karen's plastic smile flickered like a dying neon sign. "Those documents require legal review before distribution," she stammered. "We can't just hand out proprietary information to outside parties." Outside parties, on land my family had owned since before most of these people knew Texas existed. Time for my counterpunch. I pulled out my federal credentials and slid the business card across that polished table like I was dealing poker. "Well, Karen, I spent 15 years writing housing regulations at HUD. Maybe I can help navigate those legal complexities you're worried about." You could have heard a mouse sneeze. Half the board suddenly discovered their shoes were fascinating, and Karen's face cycled through more colors than a traffic light having a seizure. "Here's something most people don't know. HOAs must provide copies of all governing documents to any property owner within their claimed jurisdiction upon request. That's federal law under the Fair Housing Act. Refusing to provide them is actually evidence of discriminatory practices." The meeting ended with Karen promising to provide appropriate documentation after proper consultation. Translation: she was frantically trying to figure out how deep a hole she'd dug. As everyone shuffled out, Beverly Chun, a nervous teacher, approached me in the parking lot. "Mr. Stone," she whispered, glancing around like she was planning a jailbreak. "Karen's been lying to us about everything. Your ranch, the legal authority, even the money. I think she's planning something that could destroy this whole community." And that's how I found my first ally in what was about to become the HOA war of the century. Karen wasn't about to let my little credential reveal slow her down. Within a week, she launched bureaucratic warfare, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Monday brought Dale Whitfield and county code enforcement, claiming someone had filed complaints about unpermitted agricultural structures. Every barn, shed, and fence post built since 1952 suddenly needed documentation that had mostly gone up in smoke during a barn fire 20 years ago. Tuesday delivered the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Some anonymous tipster had reported potential groundwater contamination from my cattle operation. The inspector spent 4 hours taking soil samples, his expression growing more annoyed as everything came back cleaner than a preacher's conscience. Wednesday was my personal favorite. The state agriculture department investigated reports of diseased livestock. The veterinarian took one look at my glossy-coated, healthy cattle and asked if this was somebody's idea of a joke. The real strategy became clear. Karen wasn't trying to prove violations. She was trying to drown me in inspection fees, legal costs, and time wasted dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. Make compliance more expensive than surrender. That's when Beverly Chin showed up at my ranch Thursday afternoon, shaking harder than a paint mixer. "I haven't slept in 3 days," she said. "I keep thinking about what we've done to you, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell someone the truth." Beverly had brought presents, the kind that could land people in federal prison. Text messages, emails, bank statements, a paper trail that painted a picture uglier than Karen's attempt at natural look highlights. The whole HOA crusade wasn't about community standards. It was about cold, hard cash. Sunset Holdings, the company developing Whispering Oaks, had been feeding Karen inside information about my property for months. They wanted my 40 acres for Phase 2 of their subdivision. Karen was set to collect a $50,000 finder's fee plus first pick of premium lots if she could force me to sell. But the real bombshell was in the HOA formation documents Beverly had smuggled out. As I read through the incorporation paperwork, I nearly spit coffee all over my kitchen table. Beverly, I said, setting down my mug with deliberate care. Do you have any idea what you just showed me? Back in my HUD days, I'd reviewed thousands of HOA formation documents. The requirements are crystal clear. Articles of incorporation filed with the state, covenants recorded with the county, proper legal establishment before any enforcement authority exists. Karen's HOA had skipped every single step. Beverly, your HOA was never legally established, I said as gently as I could. You've been operating as an illegal organization this entire time. The color drained from her face faster than water through a broken dam. You mean everything we've done has no legal standing whatsoever? I finished. Karen's been running a con game, and she's used your community as unwitting accomplices. That evening brought another interesting development. Dr. Martinez called me back, her voice carrying that particular edge of someone who'd uncovered something nasty. Mr. Stone, I did some checking after my visit today. Your Ms. Whitfield has filed similar livestock complaints in Tarrant, Collin, and Williamson counties over the past 2 years, always targeting rural properties adjacent to planned developments, always completely fabricated. My blood ran cold. Karen wasn't just some power-hungry HOA president having a midlife crisis. She was running a systematic scam across multiple counties, collecting finder's fees for forcing rural families off their land. That night, I sat in Grandpa's old leather recliner, surrounded by Beverly's evidence and my growing file on Karen's operation. Outside, coyotes were starting their evening chorus, mixing with the gentle sounds of cattle settling down for the night. This wasn't just about saving my ranch anymore. Karen had turned harassment into a profitable business model, and there was no telling how many other families she'd already devastated. Time to make some phone calls to my old colleagues in Washington. If Karen wanted to play in the federal leagues, she was about to discover why you never pick fights with someone who helped write the rule book. Karen must have sensed she was losing control because her next move was straight out of the manipulation playbook. When you can't win on facts, manufacture a crisis and control the narrative. Friday morning, I woke up to find Channel 7 News parked in my driveway, their satellite truck blocking my cattle gate like they own the place. The reporter was already filming her lead-in about a controversial ranch operation threatening local residents. Karen had gathered about a dozen neighbors, including several kids, wearing surgical masks like my cattle were breathing out anthrax instead of standard bovine exhalations. This agricultural operation has been polluting our groundwater and creating unsanitary conditions for months, Karen told the camera, her voice dripping with practiced concern. We've tried reasoning with Mr. Stone, but he refuses to relocate his livestock to a more appropriate location. But here's where Karen's theatrical production started falling apart. The reporter actually did some basic journalism. While Karen was busy staging photo ops with masked children, the news crew interviewed other neighbors. Real neighbors, not Karen's carefully selected chorus. Old Pete Jameson, whose family had been friends with my grandfather since the Korean War, didn't mince words. That woman's been trying to run Garrett off his own land since the day she moved here. The Stone family's been good neighbors for 70 years. By noon, Karen's media blitz was backfiring faster than a broken tractor. The story that aired that evening wasn't about agricultural pollution. It was about a real estate agent trying to manipulate the media to force a land grab. But I wasn't content to just let Karen's credibility collapse on its own. It was time to start playing offense. I spent that weekend making phone calls to my old HUD colleagues. When you've helped draft policies that affect millions of American homeowners, people remember you. More importantly, they trust you when you call in favors. By Monday morning, I'd filed formal complaints with 3 different federal agencies. The Fair Housing Act complaint went to HUD, alleging discrimination against agricultural lifestyle choices. The real estate fraud complaint went to the Texas Real Estate Commission, detailing Karen's undisclosed conflicts of interest and systematic pattern of harassment for financial gain. But the big one went to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and violation of civil rights under color of law. When you use fake legal documents and government letterhead to threaten people, that's not just local mischief. That's federal crime territory. During my HUD years, I'd seen dozens of cases where local officials or real estate agents tried to force people off valuable land using manufactured legal crises. The feds call it theft by regulatory harassment, and they prosecute it aggressively because it undermines the entire concept of property rights. Meanwhile, Beverly was working her own magic inside the HOA. Turns out, a retired third-grade teacher who'd spent 30 years managing classroom politics was surprisingly good at organizing a rebellion. The emergency board meeting that followed was apparently spectacular. Beverly recorded the whole thing and played me the highlights. You could hear Karen's voice getting shriller by the minute as board members demanded explanations for everything from the fake incorporation papers to her secret financial arrangements with Sunset Holdings. "This is a witch hunt," Karen screeched at one point, apparently unaware that witch hunts usually don't involve actual evidence of wrongdoing. By Wednesday, 3 board members had resigned rather than face potential criminal liability, and 2 others were demanding Karen's immediate removal as president. The HOA that had seemed so solid and threatening a week earlier was crumbling faster than a stale cookie. But Karen wasn't done yet. Thursday morning brought her most desperate move. A call to the county sheriff claiming I'd threatened her during a phone conversation that never happened. Sheriff Bob Morrison had known my family for decades, and he showed up with an expression somewhere between annoyed and apologetic. "Garrett, I got to ask you about this complaint, but between you and me, I think that woman's lost her damn mind." I showed him my phone records proving I'd never called Karen, my security camera footage showing I'd been on my property all week, and Beverly's recordings proving Karen was fabricating evidence. Sheriff Morrison listened to about 30 seconds of Karen's shrieking voice before shaking his head in disgust. "Son, I've seen plenty of crazy in my time, but this woman's operating on a whole different level. You just keep doing what you're doing, and let me know if she tries anything else stupid." Saturday morning brought Beverly to my ranch again, but this time she wasn't shaking with fear. She was practically vibrating with righteous fury. She'd brought a banker's box full of documents that she dropped on my kitchen table with the satisfaction of someone delivering a smoking gun. "Garrett, you need to see this," she said, pulling out manila folders thick with financial records. Karen made one mistake. She trusted me to handle the HOA bookkeeping. What Beverly had discovered would have made a federal prosecutor weep with joy. Karen hadn't just been lying about HOA authority and manufacturing fake violations. She'd been embezzling community funds to pay for her harassment campaign against me. Pool maintenance fees diverted to legal costs. Landscaping budgets redirected to private investigators. Even the community Christmas party fund had been raided to pay for those fake government documents. "Look at this," Beverly said, pointing to a bank statement. She's stolen over $127,000 from the community fund in the past 8 months. But that wasn't even the best part. Karen's house, that $850,000 McMansion she'd been lording over everyone, wasn't actually hers. The deed was in the name of Sunset Holdings, the same development company that was paying her to force me off my land. "She never bought anything," Beverly continued. "It's all smoke and mirrors. The house, the authority, the legal threats. She's been running a complete fraud from day one." Hidden in Karen's email correspondence was the smoking gun that connected everything. A systematic pattern of targeting rural properties across Texas for developer acquisition. She'd been running the same scam in multiple counties using different HOAs as cover for what amounted to organized theft. "There are at least 6 other families," Beverly said, her voice breaking slightly. 6 other properties she's helped steal using the same playbook. The financial trail painted a picture of industrial-scale corruption. Karen had been collecting finder's fees ranging from $25,000 to $50,000 per property, plus getting first pick of premium lots in each new development. She'd turned rural land theft into a profitable business model. "Beverly," I said, looking at this mountain of evidence, "do you understand what you've just handed me?" She nodded grimly. Enough to put her in federal prison for a very long time. The power dynamic had just shifted completely. Karen thought she was playing games with some rural rube who'd roll over when pressured. Instead, she'd targeted someone with federal connections, 15 years of regulatory experience, and now a paper trail documenting systematic fraud across multiple jurisdictions. Karen's final gambit was so audacious it actually impressed me. Monday morning brought what appeared to be federal agents to my door, complete with official-looking badges, government-issued windbreakers, and an emergency health department closure order that looked authentic enough to fool most people. The lead agent, was a middle-aged man with the kind of cheap suit and nervous energy that screamed actor between gigs. His partner looked like she'd gotten her federal training from YouTube videos. "Mr. Stone," the fake agent announced, reading from a script that would have been rejected by community theater. "This property has been determined to pose a significant risk to community health and safety. You have 24 hours to relocate all agricultural operations or face federal prosecution." The paperwork was beautiful, forged government seals, official-looking letterheads, even fake EPA registration numbers. Karen had put real effort into this production, hiring actors and commissioning professional quality fraudulent documents. But here's the thing about spending 15 years writing federal regulations. You know what real government documents look like, how actual federal agents behave, and which agencies have jurisdiction over what. These clowns were about as authentic as a $3 bill. "Gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm while my security cameras recorded everything. "Could you explain which specific federal statute gives EPA authority to close privately owned agricultural operations?" The lead actor shuffled through his fake papers like a student who hadn't studied for the exam. "Under the, Federal Emergency Health Protection Act." "There is no Federal Emergency Health Protection Act." I should know. I helped write half the housing and environmental regulations these people were supposedly enforcing. "And could you provide your federal credentials for verification?" I continued, pulling out my phone like I was going to make calls. Both actors started sweating harder than manual laborers in August. The woman kept glancing at her partner with the desperation of someone who'd realized they were in way over their heads. Meanwhile, real federal agents were watching this entire performance from concealed positions around my property. My Friday phone calls to Washington had triggered a multi-agency task force investigation, and they'd been monitoring Karen's activities since Saturday. I decided to have some fun with Karen's theatrical production. Well, if this is really a federal emergency, I should probably contact my old colleagues at HUD to coordinate the response. Let me just call Assistant Secretary Johnson. The panic in both actors' eyes was beautiful. They started backing toward their rented car faster than a retreat from a fire ant hill. "Actually, Mr. Stone, we might have made an error in our paperwork," the woman stammered. "We should probably return to headquarters for clarification." They were in their car and kicking up gravel within 30 seconds. But Karen wasn't done with her performance. Within an hour, she was posting on social media about her successful federal intervention, complete with staged photos of my ranch supposedly being evacuated by government order. The Facebook post was pure Karen. Victory. Federal agents have finally taken action against the agricultural nuisance threatening our community. Property values protected. Our children are safe. Sometimes it takes real leadership to get results. She was celebrating a federal crime as a personal triumph, apparently unaware that real federal agents were documenting every word for her eventual prosecution. That afternoon brought Beverly with recordings from an emergency HOA meeting where Karen had presented her federal victory to remaining residents. According to Beverly, Karen had shown the footage of fake agents and claimed she'd personally coordinated with Washington to protect the community. "She's completely lost touch with reality," Beverly said, her voice mixing amazement with genuine concern. She actually believes her own lies at this point. But the real catastrophe came that evening when Karen tried to force compliance with her fake federal order. She showed up at my ranch with her cousin Dale and 2 other men, claiming they were there to assist with the voluntary livestock evacuation as ordered by federal authorities. My security system captured everything in HD, Karen directing her accomplices to open cattle gates, her voice clearly audible as she instructed them to help the federal process along by releasing my cattle onto public roads. That's when Sheriff Morrison arrived with backup units. The sight of law enforcement vehicles sent Karen's accomplices scattering like cockroaches when the lights come on, leaving her standing alone next to my cattle gate with the expression of someone who'd just realized they were caught red-handed. "Karen Whitfield," Sheriff Morrison announced, stepping out of his patrol car with the weary satisfaction of someone finally ending a long-running problem. "You're under arrest for criminal conspiracy, livestock theft, impersonating federal agents, and about 6 other felonies. We're still counting." The handcuffs clicking shut on Karen's wrists had the most beautiful sound, like justice finally being served with a side of cosmic irony. Tuesday evening brought the performance of Karen's lifetime. a town hall meeting she'd called to celebrate the federal resolution of the agricultural crisis. The Cedar Falls Community Center was packed wall-to-wall with residents, local media, and what Karen didn't know were federal agents positioned throughout the crowd like pieces on a chessboard. Karen had been released on bond that morning, apparently convinced that her arrest was just a misunderstanding that would be cleared up once everyone understood her coordination with federal authorities. She dressed for the occasion in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, carrying herself like a conquering hero returning from battle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, her voice echoing off the cinder block walls with the confidence of someone who believed her own press releases. "I called this meeting tonight to share some wonderful news about protecting our community's future." She clicked to her first slide, Federal Intervention Success Story, in bold letters over a photo of my ranch. "Through persistent advocacy and coordination with federal authorities, we've successfully addressed the agricultural nuisance that threatened our property values and children's health," Karen announced, apparently oblivious to the fact that half the audience was law enforcement. That's when Beverly Chin stood up in the middle of the crowd. "Karen, could you explain why you were arrested yesterday for conspiracy and fraud?" The temperature in that room dropped about 20 degrees. Karen's plastic smile flickered like a dying light bulb, but she pressed on with the desperation of someone trying to outrun an avalanche. "That was simply a bureaucratic misunderstanding," Karen said, her voice getting slightly shrill. "Sometimes federal operations require discretion that local authorities don't fully understand." Beverly wasn't done. "Could you also explain the $127,000 you stole from community funds?" A murmur ran through the crowd like electricity through water. Karen's face cycled through more colors than a sunset, but she kept trying to maintain control of her narrative. That's when I stood up in the back of the room. The entire crowd turned to look at me, and Karen's expression went from confident to terrified in about half a second. "Karen," I said, my voice carrying easily in the suddenly quiet room, "would you like to explain to everyone here about your finder's fee arrangement with Sunset Holdings?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I started walking toward the front of the room, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. "How about we discuss the 6 other families whose land you've helped steal using the same playbook? The fake HOA authority, the forged government documents." Karen was backing away from the microphone like it had turned into a snake. You're just trying to discredit me because you know I've exposed your illegal operation." "Karen," I said, reaching the stage and taking the microphone from her trembling hands. "There's something these good people need to know about their HOA president." I clicked to the next slide in her presentation, but instead of her prepared materials, Beverly had loaded the real evidence. Bank records showing embezzlement, text messages proving the conspiracy with developers, photos of Karen vandalizing my property, audio recordings of her hiring fake federal agents. The crowd's reaction was like watching a wave break. Gasps, angry murmurs, people turning to their neighbors with expressions of shock and betrayal. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, "Karen Whitfield isn't your HOA president. She's a professional con artist who's been running systematic fraud operations across Texas, stealing rural land for developers, and collecting finders' fees for destroying families like mine." That's when Special Agent Martinez of the FBI stood up in the crowd. "Karen Whitfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and violation of civil rights under color of law." The community center erupted, flash bulbs going off as reporters documented Karen's second arrest in 2 days. Federal agents moving through the crowd to coordinate with local law enforcement. Residents demanding answers about their stolen money and fraudulent HOA. Karen's final moment came when Agent Martinez read her rights in front of the entire community she'd been deceiving. No more fake federal authority. No more manufactured crises. No more clipboard wielding and designer outfits. Just handcuffs and the walk of shame past neighbors who'd finally seen through her lies. "This is a conspiracy," Karen screamed as they led her toward the door. "He's got connections. He's corrupt. This is all about protecting his illegal operation." Agent Martinez paused at the door and turned back to the crowd. "For the record, Mr. Stone's ranch has been inspected by multiple agencies and found to be in complete compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations. Ms. Whitfield has been under federal investigation for systematic housing fraud affecting multiple counties. The silence that followed was broken by old Pete Jameson. "Garrett," he called out, his voice carrying the weight of community judgment. "We owe you an apology. That woman damn near destroyed this town with her lies." 6 months later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's porch, watching the sunrise paint 40 acres of Texas land in shades of gold that no developer will ever touch. The morning coffee tastes like victory mixed with the satisfaction of a job well done, and the air carries nothing but the honest smells of cattle, sage, and freedom. Karen Whitfield is currently serving 15 to 20 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to a laundry list of charges that read like a criminal law textbook: wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, impersonating federal officers, and my personal favorite, violation of the RICO Act for operating a systematic criminal enterprise. The financial recovery was everything we'd hoped for. Federal asset forfeiture netted over $2 million in stolen funds and illegally obtained property, which was distributed among Karen's victims across multiple counties. The families she'd already destroyed got their money back, plus damages. Sunset Holdings lost their federal contracts worth over $200 million and filed for bankruptcy within 3 months. The executives are facing their own federal charges, and their entire Texas operation has been shut down permanently. But the real victory is what happened to our community. The residents of former Whispering Oaks estates formed a legitimate homeowner association with actual legal standing, proper incorporation papers, and transparent financial management. Beverly Chun serves as their first elected president. Property values in the area have actually increased since Karen's removal. Turns out legitimate governance is better for real estate prices than systematic fraud. The ranch itself has never been healthier. My cattle are thriving, and I've started offering educational tours to urban families who want their children to understand where food actually comes from. I used my settlement money from Karen's harassment lawsuit to establish the Garrett Stone Community Defense Foundation, which provides free legal assistance to rural families facing systematic harassment from corrupt HOAs or developers. We've already helped over 30 families fight back against similar scams, and our success rate is 100%. The foundation also funds educational programs teaching homeowners about their rights, proper HOA governance, and how to recognize and report systematic fraud. Knowledge is power, and ignorance is what allows predators like Karen to operate. The most satisfying development came last month when the state legislature passed the Rural Family Protection Act, legislation I helped draft that strengthens penalties for systematic housing fraud and provides additional resources for victims of land theft schemes. Karen's criminal enterprise inadvertently became the catalyst for statewide legal reforms that will protect thousands of families from similar attacks. But perhaps the best outcome is the simplest one. I get to drink my morning coffee on land that's been in my family for 70 years, listening to cattle lowing and meadowlarks singing, breathing air that smells like sage and honest work. Grandfather's legacy survived another assault, and it'll be here for another 70 years at least. The irony is beautiful. Karen thought she was targeting some helpless rural rube who didn't know his rights. Instead, she picked a fight with someone who'd spent 15 years writing the federal regulations designed to stop people exactly like her. As I watch the sun rise over land that will never be developed, never be stolen, and never be threatened by clipboard-wielding con artists again, I'm reminded of something grandfather wrote in his journal. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, but if you're fighting for the right reasons with the right knowledge, you'll usually win. Karen Whitfield discovered that lesson the hard way, and her federal prison cell gives her plenty of time to think about it. Now, I want to hear from you folks. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA nightmare stories. You might be surprised how many rights you actually have that you never knew about. And if you're dealing with systematic harassment like what Karen put me through, don't suffer in silence. There are federal resources available to help. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because unfortunately, there are plenty more Karens out there who need to learn these same lessons. And trust me, those stories are coming. Remember, folks, bullies count on you not knowing your rights. But when you do your homework and stand your ground, they fold faster than a house of cards in a Texas tornado. Knowledge is power, and power properly applied is justice. Until next time, this is Garrett Stone reminding you to fight the good fight and protect what's yours.